Alright, here we go. Number 1. The cave sealed forever. If you ever thought humans get banned from certain places for noble reasons like science or conservation, this story shows the uglier truth. Sometimes all it takes is one overly confident person to get the entire world permanently locked out. Imagine crawling into a famous cave where thousands have passed safely, thinking you're about to star in your own little adventure. Then after a few wrong turns, you end up in a passage barely wider than a dishwasher, slanting downward at an angle that forces your body upside down, as if nature is testing how much stress a human spine can handle. Once you're wedged tight, unable to move forward or backward, with gravity pressing harder every minute, you realize nature has no undo button. Rescue teams spent 28 brutal hours using ropes, pulleys, and every desperate technique imaginable. They could talk to him, touch his legs, but couldn't pull him free. Any tiny shift risked tightening the rock around him even more. When every attempt failed, authorities made the heartbreaking decision to seal the cave entirely, turning it into a permanent tomb. One single wrong turn, and a famous adventure spot vanished forever from the world's map. Number 2. Taking off shoes at the airport. There are dumb decisions, and then there are decisions so catastrophically stupid that the entire planet pays the price. The moment humanity lost its right to keep shoes on at airports started exactly like that. Imagine sitting peacefully on a flight, flight attendants handing out drinks, everyone relaxed. Then one passenger suddenly bends down, reaches into his shoe and tries to light it on fire. Not adjusting a shoelace, not fixing the insole, but taking out a lighter and torching his own sweaty sneaker. Before that moment, airport security was almost gentle. You kept your shoes, kept your water, sometimes even got a peek into the cockpit if you were polite. But one man decided his shoe should double as an explosive device, and the world instantly switched to trust no one mode. Passengers tackled him, the crew panicked, and the aviation industry immediately built shoe scanning machines, added new protocols, and created security lines so long you can scroll social media, read the news, and have an existential crisis before reaching the conveyor belt. The dark joke is that for more than 2 decades after that incident, no one else ever tried hiding explosives in their shoes. Yet billions of travelers still have to take theirs off daily, as if trapped in a global curse. One brainless act reshaped how an entire planet moves, turning airports into the world's biggest stage for reluctant sock models. Number 3. Breaking the game show. Some TV shows survive for decades, changing hosts, stages, and theme songs, all based on one comforting belief. No one can ever guess the exact perfect price. And then one man walked in and shattered that belief by treating a game show like an advanced calculus exam. Terry Nee didn't watch The Price is Right for fun. He watched it like he was training for a national championship, in household item memorization. For months he sat with his wife, writing down every prize, every price, every repetition, because the show was too lazy to update anything. When he finally got on stage, the audience cheered, and production assumed the day would go as smoothly as usual. But when he reached the showcase round, he looked at the prizes and fired off the exact total with surgical precision, as if someone fed him the answer key from the control room. When the host read the number back word for word, the entire studio froze, and production halted filming because they thought the system had been hacked. The silence was so heavy you could hear the camera rigs breathing. After investigating and confirming he didn't cheat, the show was forced to overhaul its entire prize rotation system, update pricing, and finally retire the decades-long laziness that made his victory possible. One laser-accurate guess forced an entire TV institution to admit they'd just been defeated by a man who simply did his homework too well. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe, channel, and like video. Let's keep going. Number 4. The end of lifetime returns. In the retail world, there are 2 types of customers: the ones who buy things, and the ones who treat the return policy like a magical money-printing machine. Lelbean once proudly offered a legendary promise: return anything, anytime, no questions asked. Ripped, broken, faded, chewed by your dog, crushed by time itself, they'd take it back and refund you like you bought it 15 minutes ago. Then came one man who turned that lifetime promise into a full-time career. Not the kind of person who returns a torn jacket, but someone who hunted thrift stores, garage sales, flea markets, and eco-friendly dumps to collect LL Bean items that had survived 3 generations. Every trip to the store, he'd walk in with an industrial-sized trash bag full of destroyed merchandise and walk out with a heavier wallet. When employees realized they recognized him more than their own manager, they finally understood this wasn't a quirky customer. This was a one-man business model worth tens of thousands of dollars. And in one desperate meeting, the company had to do the unthinkable, end the lifetime return policy that had lasted over a century. A single person forced an entire corporation to publish public explanations and apologize to millions of honest customers who didn't do anything wrong. One man's clever hustle erased one of the most generous retail policies in America. Number 5. The balloon disaster. There are events meant to raise money, bring communities together, and make everyone feel like they're doing something wholesome for the world. Then there's Balloon Fest, 1986. The ultimate proof that not every grand idea deserves a real-life test run. Cleveland decided to release 1.5 million balloons into the sky, which sounded heartwarming on paper but ended up looking like a Technicolor apocalypse caused by children's party supplies. Thousands of volunteers inflated balloons inside a giant structure, preparing for the spectacle that lasted a glorious 30 seconds before the weather flipped and turned everything into chaos. Instead of drifting away gracefully, the balloons hit cold air, rain, and immediately collapsed back onto the city like a multicolored plastic storm. Drivers couldn't see the road. Airports panicked because pilots couldn't tell real birds from rubber ones. And rescue teams stared in despair as the lake's surface became a shimmering carpet of balloons, making the search for missing people nearly impossible. The aftermath lasted for months. Balloons washed ashore, tangled in trees, filled the stomachs of fish, and even drifted all the way to Canada. Lawsuits piled up, and states eventually passed permanent bans on mass balloon releases. One flashy, well-intended but painfully dumb moment forced America to admit that balloons belong on birthday cakes, not in the sky. Number 6. Breaking into a power plant. Sometimes, one person is enough to make an entire country question how someone with absolutely no clearance managed to stroll into one of the most heavily protected places on Earth. The story begins at a fully operating nuclear power plant, surrounded by multiple layers of security fencing, and a guy whose love for live streaming apparently overwhelmed his ability to process the phrase, restricted area. Marcus Thompson spotted a small gap in the fence a maintenance crew had forgotten to seal. Basically the universe dangling a forbidden door side quest in front of someone with zero impulse control. Instead of reporting it or walking away like a normal citizen, he slipped inside and immediately fired up a live stream to 200 viewers, proudly announcing that he was hanging out in the middle of a nuclear facility. Every step he took triggered silent alarms in the control room, convincing the security team they were dealing with a low-tech but extremely bold terrorist. The plant went into instant lockdown. Employees were stuck inside for hours, and national security officials had to explain how an unarmed man armed only with reckless enthusiasm and a dying phone battery got that far in. The incident forced the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to rewrite security protocols, upgrade surveillance systems, and treat every tiny structural gap as a national emergency. Marcus ended up in federal prison, and the entire industry walked away with a painfully expensive reminder that one open fence and one clout chaser are enough to cause chaos on a nuclear scale. Number 7. Banning metal detecting. Some hobbies are so harmless you'd think no law on Earth could possibly ruin them. It's just you, a metal detector, and the hope of finding a couple of lost coins. Then one man decided to turn this peaceful pastime into a bootleg archaeological operation, with zero training and even less common sense. In Richland, Washington, he didn't stroll around, gently searching for tiny treasures. He dug holes like he was prospecting for gold, carving craters next to trees, beside historical markers, and pretty much anywhere his machine beeped. The park soon looked like a miniature bomb testing site, but things went completely off the rails when he stumbled onto what he believed was a native burial area. That should have been the moment to call professionals. Instead, he dug in barehanded like he was opening a mystery loot box, and ended up damaging artifacts more valuable than his entire metal detecting setup. When rangers found him, the scene looked like a museum that had been dismantled by someone who'd never heard of ethical guidelines. The city held an emergency meeting and made a decision so fast, metal detecting clubs didn't even have time to complain. They banned metal detecting across all city parks. Overnight, responsible hobbyists lost their pastime because one guy thought he was Indiana Jones with a clearance sale budget. Today, in many parts of Washington, trying to use a metal detector requires about as much paperwork as opening a nuclear facility, a reminder that it only takes one overenthusiastic amateur to shut down a hobby for everyone. Number 8. Florida banned pythons. Some disasters are so massive, it's hard to believe they started with one person who simply didn't lock a cage. In 1992, Florida was hit by Hurricane Andrew, and buried among the wreckage was a mistake that spiraled into an ecological nightmare. A python breeding facility that treated hurricane prep like an optional suggestion. The owner kept more Burmese pythons than legally allowed, and instead of securing the enclosures, they left everything so flimsy that when the storm hit, it basically opened a giant free-to-roam sign for the snakes. Dozens escaped into the wild, and what followed was a long-term ecological collapse straight out of a horror documentary. Within decades, the population exploded into the hundreds of thousands massive 6-meter, 100-kilo predators that eat anything with a heartbeat in the Everglades: rabbits, raccoons, deer, and even alligators. With native species wiped out and the giant snakes thriving like they just claimed the biome for themselves, Florida had no choice but to ban Burmese python ownership entirely and classify them as one of the state's most destructive invasive species. The wild part is, every bit of this decades-long chaos started because one single person didn't bother to secure their cages. One careless moment turned an entire state into a live-action ecological battleground. Number 9. NFL banned stickum. In sports history, there are athletes so good they forced the rulebook to change. And then there's Lester Hayes, who wasn't just good, he practically glued himself to the football. The NFL once allowed stickum, a super adhesive substance that helped players grip the ball. Most athletes used a thin layer for better control. But Lester followed a different philosophy: the more the better. He smeared it on his hands, his forearms, his jersey, and basically anything the rules didn't explicitly forbid. By kickoff, he looked like he had taken a bath in maple syrup, earning nicknames that ranged from human flypaper to walking bug trap. Once the ball touched him, it wasn't going anywhere, and his 1,980 season stats were so absurd they felt like a glitch. But there was a problem every time Lester finished a down. The ball was sticky. His uniform had to be swapped during games, and referees had to wipe their hands so often they might as well have carried towels as equipment. Watching the chaos, the NFL realized they couldn't let one man turn himself into an infinite buff item. So in 1981, they banned stickum completely, literally naming it the Lester Hayes rule, because everyone knew exactly who caused it. And once the glue was gone, his interception numbers dropped sharply, proving that not every superpower is natural. Sometimes it literally comes from a jar. That's all for today. Comment the one that fooled you the longest, and subscribe if you want more brain bugs explained.